happened. NASCAR getting down and dirty this weekend in Tennessee.
The last time NASCAR raced on a dirt track was in 1970. Richard Petty won that race.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
That's beautiful Miami right now. Welcome, everybody, to the next hour, the 8 o'clock hour of Fox and Friends. Welcome, Will. And
Good morning.
Steve. Good morning.
You know,
Great to all of you.
We're almost going to have Miami weather today because after a chilly week, today, as Janice Dean just told us, we're probably going to get up to 77 degrees. So we're happy we're here. Kind of.
Real treat for me coming from Wisconsin to have this weather. So
there you go.
It's warming up across the country. It's warming up in D.C. as Joe Biden gave his first press conference in 62 days of holding office. He got rave reviews from most in the mainstream media, but not from the New York Post. Here's how they characterized the press conference yesterday: glazed and confused. Why did the New York Post say that? Well, because of moments like this. Watch.
The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done. When I was United States Senator, Vice President, am I giving you too long an answer? Because if you don't want the detail. No, but I mean, I don't know how much detail you want about immigration. Okay, where am I here? Let me see.
Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. You got the right code for your credit card. What was your dog's name? Okay, hang on. Sorry. Oh.
One name not on that list, Geraldo Rivera, Fox News correspondent at large. He joins us live from his secret bunker out in Ohio or someplace. Where are you today,
Geraldo?
Geraldo?
Sarasota, Florida.
I'm in Sarasota, Florida, where your weather in New York is apparently warmer than ours here, but I'll be seeing you shortly.
It's great to have you. Geraldo, what did you make of Joe Biden? Was he glazed and confused as the New York Post depicts him?
Well, I was disappointed, I must say, profoundly disappointed that he did not call on Peter Doocy, our White House correspondent, who had a plethora of relevant and pointed questions.
A binder full.
I thought the President of the United States, yes, a binder full. The President artfully dodged. I found that unfortunate. However, I must admit that he was not, Joe Biden, the President of the United States, was not the pathetic, senile, incomprehensible old fool that some critics had predicted he would be in an hour-long press conference. I thought he did a substantively fine job. He answered most of the questions. You highlighted some of the areas where he drifted off, as sometimes happens to us septuagenarians. It may happen to me right now. I may go start talking about baseball or
Jim Eagle.
Yeah, but Geraldo, that's a little bit to me like saying you're having a mostly peaceful protest with fires burning in the background. The question is whether or not Joe Biden was going to be defined by his moments of clarity or his moments of confusion. And at some points, Geraldo, it went beyond moments of confusion. It went into moments of dishonesty. He talked about the border crisis and it being worse under Donald Trump, that it's actually getting better, when the numbers are as follows, and we can put them up on your screen. February 2017, and then year by year, 18, 19, 20, you can see at home, they are going up in 21, up to 100,000 border encounters. It just defies what Joe Biden had to say, Geraldo.
Well, substantively, Will, I wasn't asked whether I thought that his answers were correct, only that his answers were coherent. Joe Biden believes very deeply.
I don't know, what's the difference?
Well, this substantively, President Biden believes in a much more compassionate approach to the situation at the border, and I think in this case, his good intentions and his naivete have blown up in the face of America by his welcoming by the Mexican president López Obrador, promoting Joe Biden as the immigrant president. He unleashed this force on the southern border.
But Geraldo, you know, for you to say that he's this more compassionate, he's more humane than the Donald Trump legacy when it comes to our southern border, that flies in the face of the fact that there's a global pandemic. And the federal government under Joe Biden has got children in these detention centers at 1,500% in some instances over capacity. They've turned into super spreader events. So maybe the intention is good, you know, we're going to try to do this, but the execution is terrible because there's real danger at those particular facilities when it comes to COVID, because north of 10% of every kid coming in has got it.
True, Steve, absolutely true. And that is the downside to his compassionate approach. Now, he is using, let everyone understand, President Biden is using Title 42, which President Trump has promoted. Title 42 says anyone who arrives at the southern border without authorization gets turned back immediately. That's the way it, because of COVID. Everyone who comes in, it's a turnstile. They come, they go, they come, they go, with the exception of children under the age of 18. Joe Biden simply will not budge on children under the age of 18. The 46th president of the United States believes that American values are such that we embrace youngsters coming without adults accompanying them across the southern border. He wants those kids taken care of on the American side. That is different from Donald Trump. Now, is that inviting other kids to come? Is that exacerbating the crisis at the southern border? Probably. You know, he is the victim of his own good intentions in this regard, I believe. I think you need a combination of his compassion and Trump's hard-nosed pragmatism to make that border something like a sane place. But right now there is chaos. You're absolutely right. We have to see where the children are being kept in some of these cages, quote unquote. We have to make sure that there is a system being developed to absorb these children, either in the foster care system or in other HHS facilities, because right now, if we were given access to these facilities, I fear that what we would see is chaos and children being abused, guys.
Right, but it's not just that they're in poor conditions once they get to our country. I just really take issue with this idea of wrapping up this policy in humanitarianism and compassion, because all we're doing is enriching, you know, drug cartels, human traffickers. We're creating a situation that is making it easier for children to get lost in a system and possibly, you know, turned over to some very bad individuals even after they leave our detention centers. This is not compassionate. Yesterday there was a report who talked about a little boy who came over by himself from Honduras as a 9-year-old. And for those of us who live the lives we lead, to say that that's okay, that encouraging that, and there's a policy that's encouraging him to come alone. He
walked from Honduras.
He walked alone, a 9-year-old. Most of us here wouldn't let our 9-year-old cross the street over here in New York City. So I can't imagine. I'm so confused by it. And then again, for him to say, oh, it's not a surge, it's all under control. That's not true. He himself is calling up foster parents who should be taking care of American kids, asking them to take on more people, telling people in the federal government to take a leave of absence from their jobs and deploy over to the refugee center, opening up our military centers, our military bases for children when we don't open them up for our own homeless. And again, this focus on the border when we should be focusing on getting our country back, our kids back in school, our economy back, and our jobs back.
Well, you laid out a platform that's very, very difficult for Biden under his current administration to fix. But let me handle just two aspects, Rachel, of what you said, because I think it was very, very important. In terms of the 9-year-old kid coming without any supervision by an adult. Here's a kid who basically has been on his own for 1,500 miles, the long trek from Guatemala all the way across Mexico north to the U.S. border. He crosses the border. He gets nabbed immediately by the Border Patrol. What's he going to do? So we all have had, I have 5 kids, we've all had 9-year-olds. We know their capacity. Can you imagine the terror of both the parent and the child in unleashing a 9-year-old to cross the border on his own? The mother, you know, Mexicans and Guatemalans and Hondurans and Salvadorans, they love their children just as much as Americans. It must be absolutely a horrible pain in their heart to set their child loose on the border. I think that's one thing, and I think the president is probably right in my view that the 9-year-old should be kept in the United States, that we should find some facility for the 9-year-old. But here's my headline that I think is being really, really underreported. Under President Trump, Lopez Obrador, the Mexican president, did everything President Trump wanted him to. He mustered the Mexican army. He used the Mexican army on the Guatemala-Mexican border to keep the Guatemalans in their own country, keep them from crossing into Mexico. He was an obstacle to their entire trek north. Now, with Biden, Lopez Obrador says, okay, here's this smart-ass American liberal president who thinks he's going to fix everything with American compassion. I tell you what, Mexicans are washing our hands with it. The Mexican army is not involved. So
you're blaming Mexico?
Our partner south of the border has screwed us. I think that is part of this story that's been grossly underreported, Rachel.
No, I think the Mexican government and the Mexican president is upset that Biden reversed these policies. Listen, initially the Mexican government
being in Mexico worked out great until it didn't.
Exactly. When he's saying, hey, there are businesses. We had our own Griff Jenkins over at the border talking to businesses down there, and they're like, this is a disaster here because of this surge, and it's ruining small businesses on the border. Crime has gone up. Drugs have gone up. I think that the Mexican president is simply saying, hey, we're upset that you've reversed policies. And Joe Biden is lying when he says that President Trump's policies weren't working. They were.
Remember the old saying, we all used to say it, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Joe Biden had good intentions, but he didn't think out. What happens if I do A, what happens with B? If I let the kids in, and are the facilities then going to be overcrowded? The children become unsupervised? Will that be an incentive for other children to come? I think that he jumped into immigration. Now he's selected Vice President Kamala Harris to be in charge of it. I suggest that should have happened first. If he should have put in place his emergency team first and then made these dramatic changes. You know, I'm not a fan of what he did. I just think that Americans have to be compassionate to the bottom line. The 9-year-old coming across, the United States has to be America enough to take care of that kid.
You just have to be pragmatic enough to understand when your compassion or your desire to have humane policies create inhumane situations. Hey, Geraldo, I do really want to get your perspective on this as well. Let's take a quick listen to a question from the press conference yesterday, and we'll talk on the other side.
Okay.
Will you commit to allowing journalists to have access to the facilities that are overcrowded moving forward?
I will commit when my plan very shortly is underway to let you have access to not just them, but to other facilities as well.
We haven't seen the facilities in which children are packed together to really give the American people a chance to see that. Will you commit to transparency on this issue?
I will commit to transparency. And as soon as I am in a position to be able to implement what we're doing right now.
Just to be clear, how soon will that be, Mr. President?
I don't know, to be clear.
Geraldo, you've been an investigative journalist, you've been a war correspondent, you have gone out and found the stories even when they're hid from you. When someone says, I'll let you see after I get my house in order, it has to suggest we don't want you to see what's happening right now.
You're absolutely right, Will. You know, I made my bones exposing institutions for the developmentally disabled. If I waited for an invitation, if I waited, if I had waited in Willowbrook for the administration to say, okay, we're ready for you now. Actually, they did have some press demonstration days that were far different than the grim reality that existed on days that my camera was not there. So I think that this is another woeful performance by the president and his team to say that the press is only invited when we say so. You know, he has tremendous goodwill among the mainstream media. I mean, if Trump had done what Biden is doing, it would have been an entirely different and far more hostile reaction by the press. But President Biden rather has the honeymoon going on. You know, he hardly gets asked any tough questions at these pressers. He avoids Peter Doocy and others who have tough questions for him intentionally. He is riding this the coattails of this period of the honeymoon. How long this lasts, I don't know. How long the press, notoriously impatient, how long they take it, I don't know. But this is a much different press than the one that confronted President Trump last time around.
That is an understatement.
The ones who are honest say there's more freedom of press on the Mexican side of the border. That's really embarrassing.
That says a lot. Geraldo Rivera joining us from Sarasota, Florida, where he is the only guy wearing a necktie on this Friday morning. Geraldo, thank you very much.
Thanks, Geraldo.
Not for long, not for long.
I bet. No, go ahead. Take it off right now. Take it off right now.
Okay. You got it.
Let's see this on the other channel, folks.
Until he's
absolutely open collar.
Really?
I got a feeling he's wearing Bermuda shorts, too, but we're not going to chance that. All right. All right.
Wow.
Hey, Jillian.
Good morning. Okay, so let's begin with a Fox News alert, because overnight a tornado in Georgia is the latest to touch down amid a deadly outbreak across the Deep South. At least 5 people were killed in Alabama. More than a dozen tornadoes were reported in the state alone. The violent storms destroying homes, trees, and power lines. And a police officer is being treated for burns after getting struck by lightning. The Boulder mass shooting suspect is moved out of county jail over safety concerns after inmates reportedly threatened him. He's being held without bail pending a mental health assessment. He appeared in court for the first time yesterday, where he was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. This, as we learn, police arrested him with the handcuffs used by Officer Eric Talley, who was shot and killed in the shooting. His funeral is scheduled for Tuesday. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear vetoes a school choice bill, this despite his own children enrolled in private schools. The bill would have given families more freedom in education choices, but the Democrat claims it would harm public schools by taking away funds. And watch as a SpaceX rocket booster falls out of orbit, causing a streak of bright lights across the night sky. The rocket burning and splitting into multiple pieces over parts of Washington and Oregon as it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. But the unexpected light display prompted several calls to the National Weather Service because people thought it was a meteor. No damage is reported. That is a look at your headlines. I will send it back to you.
The way it's going past the Space Needle, it just looks like part of a movie or something.
Yeah.
But it really happened. All right, Jillian.
Thanks, Jillian.
Visiting the border for a first-hand look at the crisis today. Utah Senator Mike Lee is also a member of that Republican delegation. He joins us right now from Mission, Texas. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, the president has said, I'm going to be transparent. I'm just not going to be transparent right now. You're not going to take that for an answer. You are down there to see the situation with your own 2 eyes. But I understand you're not going to be allowed to take any pictures or anything or bring members of the press along because that is a bridge too far right now for the administration. They don't want the pictures out.
Yeah, they made it into a press-free zone, which is why we're going to have to tell the story for the country. Now, look, we're not journalists. We're not good at any of that. But if we're the only Americans who can be allowed in there, we're going to tell the story. And it's one of the reasons why we've got 18 U.S. senators down here in Mission, Texas. We want to get to the bottom of what's happening.
You know, and it was this week that you actually introduced legislation to try to fix the system. And I'm sure you're going to get Republican support. But the big problem is, can you get people on the Democratic side to sign on as well?
You know, Steve, the worse this crisis gets, and the more people who see what we saw last night. I'm standing right next to Senator Cruz last night at about midnight as we were standing right on the banks of the Rio Grande. We had drug smugglers, cartel members, people who are making $14 million every single week while this crisis lasts, bringing people across the border illegally, subjecting them to untold privations, sexual abuse, and other horrible things. They were yelling at us, taunting us, shining high candle power flashlights across the river at us, basically saying, we're coming.
Yeah.
And these are easy things to fix. That's why I introduced this bill, the Stopping Border Surges Act, along with Andy Biggs in the House. And this adopts a couple of common sense policies, many of which really predate the Trump administration, others of which were adopted somewhat more fully during the Trump administration, but that we've now abandoned.
You know, the administration is having some messaging problems because they are making it very clear, if you want to travel internationally and fly into the United States, you need to have a negative COVID test. And yet at our southern border, under this president, the Border Patrol, which is not administering COVID tests to incoming migrants and is not administering tests to migrants when they release them into the interior of the United States, you're going to see later today, it is a super spreader event at these detention centers. But nobody's talking about the fact that while Joe Biden says, I'm trying to stop the flow of COVID into the country, he's not stopping the flow if he's not stopping the migrants with COVID by not having them federally tested.
No, not at all. And look, it's a tragedy that we make it harder for U.S. citizens to come back to their own country than we do for people who are coming here illegally, enriching the drug cartels in the process. And I'm told from some sources that the people coming through the caravans are testing positive for COVID at a rate 7 times what we see here.
Yeah.
This is unacceptable. It absolutely defies reason and logic. And these are solvable problems. All we have to do is go back to old policies that we've got through bilateral agreements with our northern and southern neighbors, Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
And we expand that. We should be able to send back unaccompanied minors who show up here on their own, send them back to their own countries. We also want to be able to set up these agreements that the Trump administration negotiated with the Northern Triangle countries, saying that if you want to seek asylum in the United States, but you cross through another country first, if that country's safe, like Mexico, that's where you're seeking asylum.
Or maybe just put a pause on all of that stuff until after the coronavirus subsides, but maybe that makes too much sense. Senator, thank you.
With some headlines now, Jacob Blake Jr. is suing the Kenosha police officer who shot him, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. Blake is accusing the officer of using excessive force because he was shot 7 times. The officer says he opened fire because he feared for his life. The lawsuit is seeking a jury trial for unspecified damages. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey admits the platform made a mistake blocking the bombshell New York Post story about Hunter Biden's emails. Listen to this.
It was literally just a process error. This was not against them in any particular way.
Was anyone held accountable in your censoring department for that mistake?
Well, we don't have a censoring department.
Twitter locked the Post's account for more than 2 weeks, claiming the publication used hacked information in its story. When asked who locked the account, Dorsey refused to reveal who was responsible. And are you having a hard time locking in a wedding venue this year?
Thank you so much for coming. Now, please take your hay bales to the reception. They'll be used for seating. Complimentary hay hooks are placed along the aisles. Just stab them on in there.
Busch Beer is offering 3 couples outdoor weddings at one of their scenic farms in Idaho and North Dakota. Up to 100 guests can attend. Tell the company how Busch brings you together by April 7th for your chance.
The location, it actually looks like Wisconsin. All right, thank you, Jillian. Well, it's Women's History Month, and to celebrate, we're showcasing a military hero. Captain Shay Haver opened the doors for females to join one of the most elite fighting forces the country has to offer, the U.S. Army Rangers. The anchor of Fox News at Night, Shannon Bream, also author of Women of the Bible Speak. She joins us now with more. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you, Rachel. So listen, being the first at anything, you have a lot of pressure on yourself. Society is watching. So this is the story of a woman who was not only the first who was allowed to attempt something, she succeeded at it. It's all about perseverance.
It brought me into a community that I otherwise would not have had a part of.
On her military uniform, U.S. Army Captain Shay Haver shows quiet pride in the little cloth patch that symbolizes so much. Earning that tab in 2015 along with Captain Kristen Greist, they became the first women to graduate from the Army's elite but hyper-vigorous Ranger School, ending 6 decades as an all-male institution.
There was never a chip on my shoulder, like I've got to prove this to the world. But ultimately what I got to prove to myself was that I do have a higher capacity than I ever thought that I did.
The Rangers were tested on their physical and mental toughness, enduring weeks of rugged environments. Woods, mountains, and swamps. The Army insists it held the women to the same standards as the men.
I got to watch myself succeed in some ways and myself grow mentally, physically, and then not to prove to others, but to prove to myself that I was value added to the team, value added to myself, validation of myself.
The training goal: to simulate real-life combat as closely as possible, chasing your mental and physical limits. Equal standards, equal challenges, watching leaders emerge, regardless of gender, as Haver noted after Ranger graduation.
It's pretty cool that they have accepted us. I think that we ourselves came to Ranger School skeptical, like with our guards up, ready just in case, the haters and the naysayers.
17% of the U.S. military is female. But the Army opened Ranger School to women in 2015 on a trial basis, many convinced they would not have the strength or guts to succeed. Yet past military policy to exclude was meeting reality. After the 9/11 attacks, women began serving under fire in war zones across Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2013, the formal ban on women in combat ended. Haver says the women and men who succeeded in Ranger School did so because of the teamwork and supports of each other. Then Second Lieutenant Michael Janowski recalled struggling from the weight of heavy equipment on a training patrol. Haver alone volunteered to help.
Literally saved me. I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't for Shay. So from that point, no more skepticism.
Since Haver's groundbreaking accomplishment, 52 more women have earned the Ranger tab. Today, Haver is a company commander with the 3rd Infantry Regiment, the so-called Old Guard, conducting memorial and ceremonial affairs. The captain led the military honor guard for the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Ready, stop!
As her casket was carried into the Capitol last fall. Haver says the lessons learned in challenging the status quo start with challenging yourself.
You can't win them all. However, you can be your best version of you every day. I can still show up every day, still trying to be the best me that I can be, and not let the pressure from others' expectations burden you in that way.
Wow, Shannon. And the Ranger firsts keep coming. Captain Emily Lilly, by the way, in 2018 was the first National Guards woman, and at 39, the oldest female to get this done. She says she wanted to prove to her kids that she could do it. She also has a tattoo that says this: the question is not who will let me, but who will stop me. These women are impressive.
Wow, and a mom. That's fascinating.
I know, on top of everything else.
Wow, well, this is a fascinating story. For more stories just like this, head over to foxnews.com/America Together. Plus, remember, Shannon's new book, Women of the Bible Speak, is available on Tuesday. Thank you so much for bringing this story to us, Shannon.
Thanks, Rachel. I feel like I need to go do some push-ups. I'm very inspired.
Me too. I need to work out. All right. Coming up, President Biden fumbles and trails off during his first press conference.
Like to be able to, anyway. We're going to get a lot done. When I was United States Senator, Vice President, I don't know where you guys come from, man. I've never been able to travel. Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. You got the right code for your credit card. What was your dog's name? Okay, hang on. Sorry. Oh.
That was Joe Biden yesterday, stumbling through his first press conference as president. Let's bring in the host of Justice with Judge Jeanine Pirro is here to react. Judge, what did you think?
You know, I don't know whether to feel sorry for him or to be infuriated. I mean, this is the president of the United States, the leader allegedly of the free world, and this guy gets lost in his thoughts. He stops mid-sentence. You know, he says, I don't know where you guys are coming from. I want to travel, in the middle of his sentence. This is exactly the kind of guy that you want on the witness stand to cross-examine, because you know he's this close to losing his cool and losing his temper, and he almost did with some of the questions. You know, well, I don't know what's wrong with you guys. And had the question pursued, you know, he would have totally lost his cool. He was lost. Period.
Judge,
and it's sad. Even his cheat sheets, even what he was reading, he couldn't read it properly.
I love the analogy, Judge, because a courtroom, a cross-examination reveals so much. Whether or not you're telling lies, whether or not you're sharp, whether or not you're angry, you have to be pressed, and we know that type of cross-examination will not come from the press. Judge, I want to ask you, while I have time with you here, about another big story, though, and that is the governor of New York and his CNN anchor brother, who was apparently prioritized in getting COVID-19 tests a year ago in the spring when it was so hard to get a hold of those tests. Here's what the Albany Times-Union is reporting. Here's the headline: top health officials told to prioritize COVID testing for Cuomo's relatives. Governor Cuomo's office is saying in the early days of this pandemic, when there was heavy emphasis on contact tracing, we were absolutely going above and beyond to get people testing, including in some instances going to people's homes. Among those we assisted were members of the general public, including legislators,